The antique jewelry box felt unusually light in my hands. That was my first clue something was wrong. My grandmother's emerald necklace, the pearl earrings she wore at her wedding, the sapphire ring passed down 3 generations. All of them gone. In their place lay a hastily scribbled note in my mother-in-law's unmistakable handwriting. Had to borrow these. Will explain later. Karen. I'm Raylin, and this was the moment my perfect family facade began to crack. My hands trembled as I dialed Karen's number. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Darling, I was just thinking about you. Karen's syrupy voice came through the speaker. Where is my grandmother's jewelry? I kept my voice steady, though my knuckles were white from gripping the phone. Oh, that. She paused. Well, you never wear them anyway. They were just collecting dust in that old box. Karen, where are they? I had some financial difficulties. You know how these things go. The jewelry fetched a good price. The room spun. You sold them? Without asking me? Now, dear, don't be dramatic. They were just trinkets. I grabbed my car keys. I'm coming over. That's not necessary. I hung up and drove to her house, breaking at least 3 traffic laws. Karen opened the door before I could knock, wearing her signature pearl necklace. Not my grandmother's, of course. Hers was probably genuine. Raylin, you're overreacting, she said as I brushed past her into the living room. Noah agrees with me that you never appreciated those pieces properly. I whirled around. You talked to Noah about this? Of course. He's my son. He understands that family helps family. Those weren't yours to sell. My voice cracked. That emerald necklace was the last thing my grandmother gave me before she died. Karen waved her hand dismissively. And now it's helping family. Isn't that what your grandmother would have wanted? Don't you dare pretend you know what she would have wanted. I stepped closer. How much? Excuse me? How much did you get for them? Karen straightened her blouse. 8,000. I needed it for what? Another spa weekend? A new handbag? I had debts to settle. She sniffed. Really, Raylin, this attitude is exactly why Noah worried about letting you keep such valuable pieces. My phone buzzed. Noah. Where are you? Mum called saying you're acting crazy. I laughed bitterly. Did she tell you she sold my grandmother's jewelry? Yeah, she mentioned that. He sounded annoyed. Look, they were just sitting there. Mom needed the money, and you never even wore them. They were mine, Noah. Mine. They're just things, Ray. Don't make this a bigger deal than it is. I looked at Karen, who wore a small, satisfied smile. In that moment, something inside me hardened. You're right, I said quietly. They're just things. And I'm just your wife, right? Just the girl who gave up her career to support your promotion. Just the woman who handles all the family events while your mother takes credit. Just the person whose inheritance apparently belongs to everyone except her. Ray, I'll be home later. I hung up and faced Karen. You know what the funny thing is? My grandmother always said jewelry tells stories. Each piece carries memories, moments, legacies. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? To you, they're just things to pawn when you're short on cash. Karen's smile faltered. Now you're just being petty. No, I'm being clear. For the first time in 5 years, I'm seeing everything clearly. I walked to the door, then turned back. You know what else my grandmother taught me? That karma has a way of coming full circle. Remember that, Karen. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you something. I met her eyes. You think you've won because you've taken my grandmother's legacy, but you've just given me something far more valuable, motivation. To do what? She laughed nervously. To show you, Noah, and everyone else exactly what I'm capable of. I opened the door. You've always treated my passion for jewelry design as a cute little hobby. Time to change that narrative. As I drove home, my mind was already racing with plans. Karen thought she'd broken me by selling my grandmother's jewelry. Instead, she'd lit a fire. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend Andrea. Hey, remember that business idea we talked about last month? The one you said I should pursue? I took a deep breath. I'm ready. and I know exactly where to start. The jewelry might be gone, but my grandmother's real legacy, her creativity, her determination, her spirit, that lived in me. And I was about to make sure everyone remembered that. You should have seen her face when I told her about karma, I said, sprawled on Andrea's couch, nursing my second glass of wine. Like she couldn't decide whether to laugh or call security. Andrea sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop open to a business plan template. Karen's always underestimated you. But seriously, Ray, what's the actual plan here? Because revenge through success sounds great, but we need details. I pulled out my sketchbook, flipping to the designs I'd been too afraid to show anyone. Remember how I used to sketch my grandmother's pieces? I've been developing my own collections based on them. Modern takes on classic designs. These are incredible. Andrea leaned forward, pointing to a necklace design. Is this inspired by the emerald piece Karen sold? Yeah, I smiled. But see how I've reimagined it? Instead of one central stone, it's a cascade of smaller gems, more wearable, more modern. And more marketable, Andrea added, typing furiously. We could start with an online presence. Build a following on Instagram, showcase your process. The doorbell rang. Andrea checked her phone and grinned. Perfect timing. I invited someone you need to meet. She opened the door to reveal a sharp-dressed man in his 40s. Raylin, this is Daniel Oliver. He's an investor who specializes in emerging luxury brands. I shot Andrea a panicked look, but she just winked. Andrea's been telling me about your work, Daniel said, settling into an armchair. She mentioned you're looking to turn your designs into a proper business. I straightened up, suddenly very aware of my wine glass. I am. Though I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting to pitch to an investor tonight. Good. Rehearsed pitches are boring. He gestured to my sketchbook. Mind if I take a look? For the next hour, we talked designs, market positioning, and production costs. Daniel asked tough questions, but his eyes lit up at several of my sketches. There's something here, he said finally. Your designs tell stories. That's rare in this market. Most new designers chase trends. You're creating narratives. That's what jewelry should do, I said. Every piece should mean something. Speaking of meaning, Andrea interjected, tell him about your grandmother's collection. I hesitated, then shared the story of Karen's betrayal. Daniel's expression darkened. So you're planning to recreate the lost pieces? Not exactly. I'm using them as inspiration to create something new. Something that honors the past but looks to the future. I pulled out my phone, showing him photos of the original jewelry. See this ring? Instead of copying it, I'm taking its essence, the way the sapphire caught light from 3 angles, and translating that into a modern design. With a built-in marketing story, Daniel nodded. The phoenix rising from the ashes narrative. People love that. This isn't just about marketing. Of course not, he cut in. It's personal. That's what makes it powerful. But if you want to succeed, really succeed, you need to think bigger than revenge. Andrea leaned forward. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that selling a few pieces online isn't enough. You need a launch event, something that puts your brand on the map. He paused. Something that forces certain people to acknowledge your success. Like a fancy dinner party. Andrea's eyes sparkled. Where Raylin could debut her collection to potential buyers and, oh, I don't know, invite her entire family. I caught her meaning and couldn't help smiling. That would be quite an event. I'll tell you what, Daniel said, standing. Develop a proper business plan. Show me production costs, marketing strategy, everything. If I like what I see, I might be interested in backing your launch. After he left, Andrea poured more wine. Well, it's happening fast, I admitted. This morning I was just angry. Now we're talking investors and launch parties. Sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. She grabbed her laptop. Now, let's work on that business plan. We have a mother-in-law to impress. I pulled out my phone to check the time and saw 3 missed calls from Noah. I silenced it. You'll have to talk to him eventually. Andrea said softly. I know, but right now I need to focus on this. I opened my sketchbook to a fresh page. Besides, actions speak louder than words, and I'm about to make quite a statement. As we worked into the night, my grandmother's words echoed in my mind. Jewelry isn't just about beauty, dear. It's about power. The power to mark moments, to tell stories, to transform yourself. Karen thought she'd stripped me of my inheritance. Instead, she'd given me the push I needed to claim my own power. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take it away. The sound of metal hitting metal filled my converted garage workshop as I carefully shaped a delicate silver wire. 3 weeks had passed since meeting Daniel, and I'd barely left the space except for essentials. Honey, Noah's voice interrupted my concentration. It's midnight. Are you coming to bed? I didn't look up from my work. Almost done with this piece. He sighed, leaning against my workbench. You've been out here every night this week. This hobby is getting out of hand. The word hobby made my hand still. It's not a hobby, Noah. It's a business. Come on, Ray, you can't seriously think. I have an investor interested. I finally met his eyes. A real one. Daniel Oliver. Noah's expression shifted from dismissive to concerned. You're meeting with strange investors now. Does Mum know about this? Why would your mother need to know about my business decisions? Because she has experience. She ran that boutique for years. The one she had to sell to pay off her gambling debts. The words shot out before I could stop them. Noah's face reddened. That's not fair. She had a rough patch that she solved by selling my inheritance. I turned back to my work. And no, I haven't told her about Daniel. I don't need her sabotaging this too. You're being paranoid. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, if you need money for your project, we can discuss it. But getting involved with outside investors is risky. I held up the piece I was working on, a pendant inspired by my grandmother's emerald necklace, but with my own twist. Instead of a single stone, I'd created a cascade of tiny emeralds set in a modern, asymmetrical design. What do you see when you look at this? Noah shrugged. It's nice. Pretty. Pretty, I repeated. Your mother saw my grandmother's jewelry as just pretty things to pawn. You see my work as just a pretty hobby. Neither of you actually see me. The doorbell rang, surprising us both at this late hour. That's probably Malia, Noah said. She mentioned stopping by. I followed him to the door, where his sister stood with 2 bottles of wine and an apologetic smile. Sorry it's so late. I was in the neighborhood and saw your lights on. She breezed past us into the kitchen. Noah, be a dear and grab some glasses. As Noah went for wine glasses, Malia turned to me. So, little sister, rumor has it you're starting a business. My guard went up immediately. Who told you that? Oh, you know how word travels in this family. She smiled sweetly. Mum's worried you're making rash decisions because of the jewelry situation. The jewelry situation, I repeated flatly. You mean when she stole and sold my inheritance? Ancient history. Malia waved her hand. Family forgives. But this business venture, are you sure you're ready for something like that? The market's so competitive. Noah returned with the glasses. That's what I was just saying. I mean, look what happened to Mum's boutique, Malia continued, and she had years of experience. Your mother's boutique failed because she gambled away the profits, I said quietly, not because of market conditions. Malia's smile tightened. Careful, Raylin. Family dynamics can shift very quickly when people start throwing around accusations. Is that a threat? A friendly warning? From someone who's been in this family longer than you? She sipped her wine. Mum's protective of Noah. She won't like you risking your joint finances on some jewelry-making scheme. I laughed. You know what? I don't care what Karen likes anymore. And my finances are none of her business. Ray, Noah started, but I cut him off. No, I'm done letting your family dictate my choices. I headed back to my workshop. Lock up when you leave, Malia. Behind me, I heard Malia's stage whisper, Noah, you need to get this under control. Mum's really worried about her. In my workshop, I pulled out my phone and texted Andrea. Family ambush tonight. They're already trying to stop me. Her reply came instantly. Perfect. The more they underestimate you, the better. BTW, Daniel loved your business plan. Meeting tomorrow at 10. I smiled, picking up my tools again. Let them think I was being rash. Let them whisper their warnings and concerns. Every doubt they expressed just fueled my determination. I worked through the night, completing 3 more pieces for my collection. Each one told a story, not just of what was lost, but of what I was becoming. And soon, very soon, they'd all see exactly what I was capable of. As dawn broke, I heard Noah leave for work without saying goodbye. That would have hurt once. Now it just reminded me why I needed to succeed. Not just for revenge, but for myself. Your Instagram following has tripled in the last 2 weeks, Daniel said, scrolling through my social media metrics. The behind-the-scenes videos of your crafting process are especially popular. We sat in his downtown office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows. 2 months had passed since our first meeting, and my brand was gaining traction faster than I'd imagined. The pre-orders are exceeding expectations too, I added, pulling up the sales data on my tablet. Especially for the Phoenix collection. Daniel smiled. Interesting name choice. Rising from the ashes seemed appropriate. His phone buzzed. The smile faded as he read the message. We might have a problem. Someone's been calling my office, asking questions about your business. My stomach dropped. Karen? She's persistent, I'll give her that. Called 3 times yesterday, claiming she's your business partner. She's not... I know, he held up a hand, but she's also been reaching out to other potential investors, suggesting your business might not be legitimate. Before I could respond, my phone lit up with a text from Andrea. Emergency, Karen's at the workshop. I have to go. I grabbed my bag. She's at my studio. Want me to come with you? No, I need to handle this myself. I broke several speed limits getting to my workshop. Karen's luxury SUV was parked outside, and Andrea stood guard at the door, arms crossed. She just showed up demanding to see your workspace, Andrea said as I approached. I told her it was private property. Karen spotted me and strutted over, designer handbag swinging. Raylin, darling, your friend here seems confused about family boundaries. There are no family boundaries anymore, Karen. You crossed them all when you sold my jewelry. Still dwelling on that, I thought you'd moved past it. She peered around me at the workshop door. I'm here to help, actually. I heard you're starting a little business, and with my experience, your experience in running a boutique into the ground, her smile tightened. I'm trying to prevent you from making expensive mistakes. These investors you're meeting with, do you really know who they are? Better than they know you, apparently. I stepped closer. Stop calling Daniel's office. Stop spreading rumors. Stop interfering. I'm protecting my son's interests. Your reckless spending on this hobby could affect his financial future. I haven't spent a dime of Noah's money. Every investment has been my own. Your own? She laughed. Where exactly did this money come from? From selling my car, from my savings, from the jewelry pieces I've already sold. I pulled out my phone, showing her my brand's website. See these pre-order numbers? That's all me. No help from family required. Karen's face darkened as she scrolled through the sales figures. These designs, they look familiar. They should. They're inspired by the pieces you stole. I did not. Save it. I took my phone back. You know what's funny? If you hadn't sold my grandmother's jewelry, I might never have found the courage to start this business. So really, I should thank you. Noah won't stand for this. Noah doesn't have a say in my business decisions. I opened my workshop door. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have orders to fill. This isn't over, Karen called as I went inside. Family dinner on Sunday, we'll discuss this properly. I turned back. Actually, I'm hosting a dinner party of my own soon. You'll all be invited to see exactly what this little business has become. After Karen left, Andrea followed me into the workshop. You know she's going straight to Noah, right? Let her. I picked up a half-finished necklace. I'm done hiding my success to make them comfortable. My phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Mom's upset, says you were disrespectful. We need to talk. I showed Andrea the message. Right on cue. What are you going to do? I opened my calendar and selected a date 2 weeks away. Book that dinner party. It's time everyone saw the truth, all at once. Drama with a side of karma. Andrea grinned. I'm in. I started crafting the invitation list. Karen and her husband, Noah, Malia and her husband, Daniel, and several prominent local jewelry buyers. The pieces from my Phoenix collection would be displayed throughout the dining room, each one a testament to what Karen's betrayal had sparked. They think they're coming to a family dinner, I said, finalizing the guest list. They have no idea they're about to attend the launch of the season's most talked-about jewelry brand. Andrea squeezed my shoulder. Your grandmother would be so proud. I touched the workshop key hanging around my neck, the last gift my grandmother gave me. She always said success is the best revenge. Time to prove her right. 3 days before the dinner party, I stood in my workshop, carefully arranging the Phoenix collection display. Each piece told part of my story, from loss to rebirth. The centerpiece was a necklace that echoed my grandmother's emerald piece, but with a modern twist that made it uniquely mine. My phone chimed with an anonymous email. Thought you might find these interesting. Attached were screenshots of Karen's text messages to various family members over the years. My heart raced as I scrolled through them. Had to borrow from Noah's college fund, he'll never know. Malia's husband almost caught me taking from their joint account. Close call. That silly girl Raylin trusts me with everything. Too easy. The timestamp showed years of manipulation and financial abuse. I forwarded the email to Andrea. Her response was immediate. Holy shit. Who sent these? No idea, I texted back, but they're real. The college fund text matches exactly when Noah had to take out extra loans. The workshop door opened, and Noah walked in, the first time he'd visited since our fight. You've been busy, he said, looking around at the displays. That's what happens when you turn a hobby into a business. He picked up one of the pieces, a bracelet inspired by my grandmother's pearl set. These are actually really good, Ray. Try not to sound so surprised. I'm not, he set the bracelet down carefully. Mom's worried about the dinner party. Of course she is. She thinks you're planning something. I met his eyes. She's right. Ray, please, can't we just have a nice family dinner without drama? Like the nice family dynamic we had when your mother sold my inheritance. Or the nice family support I got when starting my business. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is this. I showed him the screenshots. Your college fund, Noah. She gambled away your college fund and let you take out loans to cover it. His face paled as he read. Where did you get these? Does it matter? They're real and you know it. I took my phone back. Your mother has been stealing from this family for years. The only difference is, I'm the first one to stand up to her. I need to think. He headed for the door, then paused. The dinner party. What are you planning? Come and see. I turned back to my display. Oh, and Noah, wear something nice. There will be photographers. After he left, I received another anonymous email. This one contained bank statements, showing Karen had recently taken out 3 new credit cards in Noah's name. My phone rang. Andrea. I know who sent the emails, she said without greeting. Malia's husband works at the bank. He's been gathering evidence of Karen's fraud for months. Why would he help me? Apparently, Karen's been stealing from their accounts too. He's fed up. I sat down heavily. This is bigger than I thought. Use it, Andrea said firmly. The dinner party isn't just about your jewelry now, it's about exposing the truth. Daniel's bringing fashion journalists and buyers, I said. Karen won't be able to dismiss this as family drama with the press there. Speaking of press, your latest Instagram post hit 10,000 likes. The teaser video for the Phoenix collection is going viral. I smiled, remembering Karen's dismissal of my little business. Perfect timing. A text came through from Malia. "We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow." "Malia wants to meet," I told Andrea. "Think her husband told her about the evidence?" "Only one way to find out. Just be careful." I confirmed the coffee meeting with Malia, then returned to my display preparation. The pieces needed to be perfect, each one a symbol of everything Karen had tried to destroy. My phone buzzed again. "Daniel, major fashion blog picked up the story of your launch. They love the rising from betrayal angle. Karen's actions might actually help sales." I laughed at the irony. By trying to suppress my dreams, Karen had given them wings. By stealing my inheritance, she'd forced me to create my own legacy. The final piece I placed was a ring, a simple band with a hidden inscription, "From ashes, rise." I'd made it as a reminder to myself, but now it felt like a battle cry. 2 more days until the dinner party. 2 more days until Karen and everyone else saw exactly what their underestimation had created. The invitations had gone out, the press was interested, and my collection was ready. Let Karen worry, let her scheme and plot. This time, I wasn't the naive daughter-in-law hoping for approval. I was a businesswoman about to launch a brand built on the very betrayal meant to break me, and I was ready for war. The coffee shop buzzed with morning energy as Malia slid into the seat across from me. Her usual polished appearance seemed slightly frayed at the edges. "I know what you're planning," she said without preamble. "The dinner party isn't just a family gathering." "Never was." I stirred my coffee. "Question is, why are you really here?" Malia glanced around before pulling out her phone. "Have you seen this?" She showed me a series of bank statements. "My husband works at the bank and he found—" "Karen's been stealing from you too," I finished. "I know. $6,000, Raylin, from our children's savings account." Her hands shook slightly. "She said she was helping us invest it. Instead, she lost it gambling." Malia's eyes welled up. "I defended her. When she sold your grandmother's jewelry, I actually defended her." "You weren't the only one she fooled." "No, but I was the one who helped her do it." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "She asked me to distract you that day, keep you busy while she got into your house. I thought she was planning a surprise, not—" The revelation hit like a physical blow. "You helped her steal my inheritance?" "I'm sorry." Malia reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "That's why I'm here. I want to make it right." "How?" "I have evidence. Years of it. Bank statements, text messages, recordings of her admitting to taking money from all of us." She pulled out a USB drive. "Everything's here." I stared at the small device. "Why give this to me now?" "Because you're the only one brave enough to stand up to her." Malia's voice hardened. "And because she's trying to stop your dinner party." "What do you mean?" "She's calling everyone on the guest list, telling them it's cancelled. She's even contacted some journalists, feeding them false stories about your business." My phone buzzed, Daniel calling. "Excuse me, I need to take this." "Raylin," Daniel's voice was tense. "We have a situation. Karen's been contacting my other clients, telling them I'm investing in a fraudulent business. Can she hurt us? Not legally, but she's creating noise we don't need right before the launch." He paused. "There's more. She's trying to get the venue to cancel our booking for tomorrow night." I felt Malia watching me. "Let her try. I have something that might help." After ending the call, I held up the USB drive. "What exactly is on here?" "Everything." Malia's eyes gleamed. "Including proof that she's been forging Noah's signature on loan documents. The latest one was just last week." My phone lit up with texts from Andrea. "Major fashion blogger confirmed for tomorrow. Also, Noah's been trying to reach you." "I have to go," I told Malia. "But thank you for this." "Wait." She grabbed my arm. "I want to help tomorrow night. Really help. Let me be part of exposing her." I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. "Why should I trust you?" "Because she stole from my children." Malia's voice cracked. "And because you were right about karma. It's time she faced hers." Back at my workshop, I found Noah waiting. "The bank called," he said quietly. "About credit cards I never applied for." I know. Did you know before? Is that what tomorrow night is really about? I opened my laptop, plugged in Malia's USB drive. See for yourself. For the next hour, Noah sat in silence, reading through years of his mother's deceptions. His face grew paler with each document. All this time, he whispered. Every time I defended her. Noah, no, let me finish. He stood up, pacing. I chose her side, over and over. Even when she sold your grandmother's jewelry, I chose her side. Yes, you did. The dinner party tomorrow. Do what you need to do. He met my eyes. I won't stop you anymore. After he left, Andrea arrived with final preparations for tomorrow. The press is confirmed, the buyers are excited, and the collection is ready, she said, checking her list. Now we just need to stop Karen from— She can't stop this, I interrupted, holding up the USB drive. Not anymore. My phone chimed with a text from Karen. Darling, about tomorrow night. Perhaps we should postpone. Family matters should be discussed privately. I smiled, thinking of the evidence in my possession, the press waiting to cover the event, and the collection that would tell my story to the world. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, I texted back. Don't be late. The pieces were all in place. Tomorrow night, Karen would learn that some family matters deserve to be public after all. The private dining room at La Maison gleamed with strategic lighting, each piece of my collection displayed like precious artifacts in a museum. Fashion bloggers circulated with champagne flutes, their phones already capturing every detail. Daniel worked the room, chatting with potential buyers, while Andrea directed the photographer's attention to key pieces. They're here, Malia whispered, appearing at my side. Karen swept in with her usual dramatic flair, faltering slightly at the sight of the press. Noah followed, his face unreadable. The rest of the family trickled in behind them, murmuring at the unexpected setup. Raylin, darling, Karen's voice carried across the room. There seems to be some confusion. I thought this was a family dinner. Oh, it is. I gestured to the displays, along with the launch of my jewelry brand. Please, everyone take your seats. Karen's eyes narrowed at the place cards, finding herself positioned directly across from me. Perfect view of everything to come. Before we begin, I stood, addressing the room, I'd like to share a story about legacy. Raylin, Karen warned, but I continued. 6 months ago, my mother-in-law sold my grandmother's jewelry collection without my permission. Cameras clicked as Karen's face reddened. She claimed it was just gathering dust. What she didn't realize was that she gave me something far more valuable than those pieces. She gave me motivation. Daniel stepped forward. Which is why I'm proud to announce my company's significant investment in Raylin's Phoenix collection. A collection, I added, inspired by the very pieces that were stolen from me. I did not steal, Karen started. No, I nodded to Malia, who connected her laptop to the room's projector. Let's talk about stealing, Karen. The screen filled with bank statements, text messages, and loan documents. Karen's face went from red to white as her years of financial manipulation displayed for all to see. That's private family business, she hissed, like Noah's college fund that you gambled away. I clicked to the next slide. Or the credit cards you opened in his name last week. Gasps filled the room. A fashion blogger's fingers flew across her phone screen. Noah, Karen turned to her son, tell them this is ridiculous. I've seen the evidence, Mom. Noah's voice was quiet but firm. All of it. The Phoenix collection, I continued, my voice steady, isn't just about beautiful jewelry. It's about rising from betrayal. Each piece tells a story of transformation. I lifted the necklace I was wearing, my modern version of the emerald piece. This design, for instance, was inspired by my grandmother's necklace, the one you sold for $8,000. I smiled at Karen. It just sold for $20,000 in pre-orders. Impossible, Karen whispered. Actually, Daniel stepped in, we've had to start a waiting list. Your daughter-in-law's designs are the talk of the industry. And speaking of industry, I gestured to the displays, every piece here represents something you tried to take from me. But instead of breaking me, you made me stronger. Karen stood abruptly. This is a setup, a vindictive attempt to... To what? Malia interrupted. To expose the truth? Like how you stole from my children's savings account. The room fell silent. Karen looked around wildly, finding no allies. I have built something beautiful from your betrayal, I said softly. While you were trying to stop this dinner party, I was signing contracts with 3 major retailers. While you were spreading rumors about my business, I was being featured in fashion magazines. You ungrateful. The police have been notified about the credit card fraud, Noah cut in, and the bank is investigating all suspicious activities. Karen's composure finally cracked. I am your mother. Everything I did was for this family. No, I picked up a small box from the table. Everything you did was for yourself. But I want to thank you, Karen. Without your betrayal, I might never have found my strength. I opened the box, revealing a delicate ring, the one inscribed with, "From ashes, rise." This piece isn't for sale. It's a reminder that sometimes our greatest pain leads to our greatest triumph. The fashion bloggers were practically vibrating with excitement. Daniel was already fielding calls from buyers. And Karen stood frozen, watching her carefully constructed world crumble. You can't do this to me, she whispered. You did this to yourself, Malia replied. We're just finally telling the truth. As Karen fled the room, Noah reached for my hand under the table. I squeezed it briefly before standing to address the press. They had questions about my inspiration, my designs, my future plans. But the real story, the one about betrayal, resilience, and rising from the ashes, had already written itself in the tears streaming down Karen's face as she ran from the truth she could no longer hide. The morning sun streamed through my workshop windows as I carefully packaged the last online order. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the dinner party. Journalists, buyers, and countless messages from people sharing their own stories of family betrayal and triumph. Your latest Instagram post hit 100,000 likes, Andrea announced, walking in with coffee. The video of Karen storming out might have helped. Did you see the comments on the Phoenix Collection feature? All 5,000 of them. She grinned. My favorite was, Karen got served karma with a side of success. The workshop door opened again. Noah stood there, looking uncertain. The police want to talk to Mom again, he said, stepping inside. They found more evidence of fraud. How are you holding up? I asked. Better than her. He picked up one of my newest designs, a bracelet that seemed broken, but was intentionally crafted that way, the fragments held together by gold threading. Dad's filing for divorce. Turns out she's been stealing from him too. Andrea squeezed my shoulder. I'll give you 2 a minute. After she left, Noah traced the gold threading on the bracelet. This is beautiful. The way you made the broken pieces part of the design instead of hiding them. Sometimes broken things make the most interesting art. Like broken families. His voice cracked slightly. Noah. No, let me finish. He set down the bracelet. I've been thinking about what you said that night, about rising from betrayal. I watched you turn Mom's actions into something powerful while I just enabled her. You were loyal. That's not a bad thing. Loyalty shouldn't be blind. He met my eyes. I failed you, Ray. When she sold your grandmother's jewelry, when she tried to stop your business, every time she hurt you, I chose her side. Yes, you did. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I see it now. All of it. He pulled out an envelope. This is everything I inherited from my grandfather. It's not much, but it might help track down some of your grandmother's pieces. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Daniel, turn on Channel 7 now, he said without greeting. I grabbed the remote for the workshop's small TV. Karen's face filled the screen, standing outside the police station. Sources say Karen Rogers, local socialite, is facing multiple charges of fraud and financial abuse, the reporter announced. Several family members have come forward with evidence. Noah switched off the TV. She did this to herself. Maybe we all did, I said quietly. We all played our parts, her manipulating, you enabling, me staying quiet, until we didn't. The workshop door opened again. Malia entered, carrying a familiar jewelry box. Found this in Mum's storage unit, she said, placing it on my workbench. There's more, but I thought you should have this first. With trembling hands, I opened the box. Inside lay my grandmother's sapphire ring, the one piece Karen claimed she'd sold to an overseas buyer. She kept it. My voice wavered. She kept all of it, Malia said. The emerald necklace, the pearl earrings, everything. We'll bring them back piece by piece. I slipped the ring on my finger, its familiar weight both comforting and different. I wasn't the same person who last wore it. What happens now? Noah asked. Now? I picked up the broken but beautiful bracelet. Now we do what this piece represents. We acknowledge the breaks, strengthen the weak points, and create something new. Together. He sounded hopeful. That depends. I met his gaze. Are you ready to see me, really see me, without Karen's influence? Yes. No hesitation. Then yes, together. I handed him the bracelet. Starting with you wearing this to my first major runway show next week. His eyes widened. Runway show? Daniel's arranged for the Phoenix collection to feature in Fashion Week. I smiled. Turns out Karma looks good on the catwalk. Malia laughed, then grew serious. Mom's going to hate watching your success from her jail cell. Maybe, I touched my grandmother's ring, or maybe she'll finally learn what I did. That sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of finding yourself. The morning sun caught the sapphire, sending blue light dancing across my workbench. Each sparkle reminded me of my grandmother's words. Jewelry tells stories, dear. Make sure yours is worth telling. Looking at my brother and sister-in-law, at my thriving business, at the ring I'd thought lost forever, I knew my story was just beginning. And this time, I was writing it on my own terms. Now, I picked up my tools. Who's ready to help me design something new?
As the autumn sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, Linda was frying eggs in a pan. The scent of maple syrup lingered in the air as toast popped up from the toaster. Thomas entered the kitchen adjusting his tie, immediately reaching for his coffee. Dad, don't forget about baseball this Saturday, you promised. Joshua, who had just changed into his school uniform, looked up at his father while munching on toast. His red backpack was already strapped to his shoulders. Of course, I remember. I've already got the tickets. Thomas gently patted his son's head but quickly turned his attention to his smartphone screen. As an investment bank manager working in Manhattan's financial district, he had to monitor trading prices from early morning. Oh dear, your tie is crooked. Linda quickly fixed his tie, and Thomas smiled sheepishly. After 7 years of marriage, these simple daily exchanges still filled her heart with love. Well, I'm off. Thomas hurried out the door. It was about an hour's drive to Manhattan with its towering skyscrapers. In the afternoon, Linda was showing a luxury home to potential buyers. Working as a real estate agent in Westchester, a New York suburb, she was maintaining strong sales performance this month. The white mansion standing along tree-lined streets beginning to show fall colors was exactly the kind of property she excelled at selling. At this rate, you might win top sales award again this month, a colleague teased. Linda responded with a modest smile, but inside she felt confident. The connections she had built through volunteering at Sunday school were paying off in her work. Meanwhile, Joshua was being praised by his teacher for getting a perfect score on his math test. As expected of young Morrison, the teacher said, making him bashfully look down as his classmates smiled. During art time, he drew a picture of his family going to watch baseball. His father's promised outing brought a smile to his face that spread across the entire paper. He took extra care drawing himself sitting next to his father in the stadium under the blue sky. Late that night, Linda's phone rang. The digital clock showed 2 a.m. "Mrs. Morrison, your husband has been in an accident." Linda jumped out of bed at the sudden call and rushed to the hospital with a sleepy Joshua. The nighttime highway was eerily quiet, with streetlights dotting the way. At Westchester Medical Center's emergency room, a doctor with a grave expression awaited them. In the hallway filled with the smell of disinfectant, Linda held her breath waiting for the diagnosis. "His life isn't in immediate danger, but we expect he'll remain in a coma for some time. It's being treated as a single-vehicle accident," the police officer added. Based on the scene, drowsy driving seemed the likely cause. As Linda gazed at her husband's face, she wondered silently. Though he often worked late, he shouldn't have been driving on suburban roads at such an hour. "Why were you on that road so late at night?" Only the sound of the ventilator echoed in the silent hospital room. Joshua held his father's large hand in his small one. A week after the accident, Joshua paused while getting ready for school. He stared out the window, halfway through buttoning his uniform. The trees in the yard were beginning to change color, dropping leaves one by one. "Can I stay home from school today? I want to stay in Dad's room." He had been repeating this request for several days now. Linda placed her hand on her son's cheek and gently reasoned with him. His slightly pale complexion worried her. Dark circles were visible under his eyes. "Dad would be happy to know you're working hard at school." Joshua wouldn't touch his breakfast pancakes. His decreased appetite was becoming concerning. He seemed to have lost some weight recently. Still, his eyes would light up when it was time to visit the hospital. That afternoon, the school called. Linda was in the middle of showing a luxury apartment, but when she noticed the school's number, she immediately stepped away. Outside the window, the autumn sun reflected blindingly off the high-rise buildings. "He's been spacing out during class lately, and we're worried. During art time, he only uses black colors now. He must be concerned about his father." Deep concern seeped through the teacher's voice. She mentioned he wasn't playing as actively with his classmates anymore. He often stayed seated at his desk alone during breaks. During breaks, he just stares out the window. Even when we call to him, he just startles and turns around. Yesterday he barely touched his lunch. After school, Joshua was doing homework in the hospital room. He had set up a small folding desk beside his father's bed and was working on math problems. Occasionally, he would look over at his father and read him picture books. He looked like a little angel watching over his father's condition. "Dad, can you hear me? Today's story is The Wolf and the 7 Young Goats. It's your favorite, right? Look, this is where Mother Goat comes home." The nurses were touched by Joshua's behavior. Linda's work was starting to be affected. She couldn't concentrate during negotiations, distracted by potential calls from the hospital. During property viewings, she kept checking her smartphone. She even forgot to sign important contracts, having to apologize to clients. Fortunately, Her supervisor was understanding and allowed her to switch to reduced hours. Taking care of family is part of our company's philosophy. Given your track record, Mrs. Morrison, this kind of accommodation is only natural. The HR director immediately approved Linda's request. There was a general atmosphere of mutual support throughout the company. One night, Linda noticed Joshua's room was empty. Dolls were arranged on the bed to make it look like someone was sleeping. A photo of him with his father sat by the pillow. Rushing to the hospital room, she found her son sitting beside his father's bed, rubbing his sleepy eyes. In the dim lighting of the hospital room, his small back looked strangely dependable. The sound of dripping fluid echoed in the quiet space. "I have to protect Dad." That whisper made Linda anxious. When she consulted a psychologist the next day, the diagnosis was possible trauma. The shock of the accident might have deeply wounded his young heart. Due to the accident, he may be harboring strong anxiety about losing his father. However, the counselor paused, choosing their words carefully. Sunlight streaming through the window of the warm reception room wavered. "I sense there might be other factors at play. The behavior seems different from typical separation anxiety. It's almost as if he's trying to protect his father from something." After that, Linda began observing Joshua's behavior more carefully. He would head straight to the hospital after school and try to stay by his father's side until late at night. Sometimes he would fall asleep in the hallway. "Why don't you want to leave Dad's side? Did something happen?" No matter how many times she asked, Joshua would just fall silent. His downcast eyes seemed to harbor some dark shadow. He became especially anxious at night, insisting, "I need to go to Dad's room," and refusing to listen. He appeared to be carrying some important mission. Nurses reported that he often comes to check the room in the middle of the night. Security camera footage showed a small figure quietly walking the nighttime corridors. He would stop in front of the nurse's station, peering inside. Sometimes he would hide when he heard approaching footsteps. Almost as if he was on guard against something. Something is clearly wrong with him. Linda made up her mind. Tonight, she would check the nighttime hospital room. She planned to put her son to bed early and secretly return to the hospital. The cause of her son's strange behavior had to be there. Linda crept down the hospital corridor in the dead of night. Medical equipment beeped regularly in the distance, but otherwise all was quiet. The old hallway floor eerily echoed her footsteps. She had felt something strange in the air since returning to the hospital after putting her son to bed early. There had to be a reason for Joshua's changes. Tonight was the time to solve this mystery. "If my intuition is right," Linda murmured to herself as she continued down the dark corridor. On the ceiling of the passageway leading to the west wing, fluorescent lights flickered intermittently. Past the nurse's station, a young nurse was organizing documents. She looked tired in her night shift uniform. Linda returned her slight nod and headed toward the west wing where her husband's room was located. The hallway, smelling of disinfectant, was shrouded in darkness. Outside the windows, autumn trees swayed in the wind, casting eerie patterns of shadows on the hallway walls. Occasionally, distant ambulance sirens would create tension throughout the hospital. "Just checking on Thomas." The nurse nodded understandingly at Linda's words. While visiting hours were over, the hospital staff who knew the situation turned a blind eye. Over these weeks, a quiet trust had developed between them and the staff. "Mrs. Morrison, how is your son doing lately?" the nurse asked with concern. Linda returned a smile and deflected with vague words. Right now, she couldn't confide her true worries to anyone. Linda stopped in front of the hospital room. A pale blue light leaked through the door crack. Feeling her heartbeat quicken, she peered inside. The sound of dripping fluid marked time in the silence. That's when it happened. A young woman in a suit approached her husband's perfect makeup and a luxury brand suit. Something like a syringe in her hand. Linda's spine froze. The woman's hand reached for the tube. Her movements showed signs of familiarity. As if she had done this many times before. At that moment, a small shadow appeared from nowhere. A small figure in pajamas jumped out from behind a chair in the corner of the room. "Stop! Don't try to kill him." It was Joshua's voice. When had he gotten into the room? The woman turned in surprise, dropping the syringe. It hit the floor with an ominous sound. The face illuminated by the hallway light was familiar. Thomas's subordinate, Carol Baker. "You." Linda's voice trembled. Carol showed a moment of confusion before putting on a cold smile. Her luxury brand suit gleamed eerily in the nighttime hospital room. Her perfectly styled hair was now slightly disheveled. "You're supposed to be a good boy, aren't you? If you stay quiet, your mother will be safe." Those words made Joshua's small body tremble. Still, he wouldn't move from in front of his father's bed. He stood his ground with a desperate expression, small fists clenched. "This child has ruined my perfect plan." Carol's voice dripped with hatred. Her hand, slightly trembling, reached for something in her luxury brand bag. "Mama!" Joshua cried out upon noticing Linda's presence. He ran to her with tears streaming down his face. Behind him, Carol hurried toward the exit. The sound of her heels echoed in the hallway. Linda immediately called the police. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the smartphone buttons. Hospital staff gathered around. Security cameras had captured everything from the moment Carol entered the room. The syringe was found to contain a lethal dose of drugs. Laboratory analysis would reveal the brutality of her plan. Joshua clung to his mother and began speaking in a trembling voice. His small hands gripped Linda's blouse tightly. "That person made Dad have the accident. I saw it. Then she came every night, trying to do something to Dad, so I kept watch. But I couldn't tell anyone, because Mama would be in danger." Linda held her son tightly. His small body was still trembling. His young shoulders had carried too heavy a burden. "You did so well. Everything's all right now." Outside the window, the autumn night wind rustled through the hospital trees. Red leaves danced in the moonlight as they fell silently. The sound of dripping fluid echoed in the quiet nighttime hospital room. At his father's bedside, the heart monitor continued its steady rhythm. Soon the police arrived, and Carol was arrested. In the interrogation room, she would confess everything. Her ambitions of a perfect life in a luxury apartment came to an end there. Linda waited for dawn with her arm around her son's shoulders. Through the hospital room window, they could see the sky gradually brightening. There was a sense that this new day would finally bring hope. As the sun rose, the attending physician arrived with a surprised expression. The hem of his white coat fluttered with his hurried footsteps down the early morning corridor. "Ma'am, your husband's consciousness level is improving." Mother and son shed tears of joy at the news. The morning sun streaming through the hospital room window announced the start of a new day. In the vase by Thomas's bed were autumn wildflowers that Joshua had picked during each visit. The flowers gleamed gently in the morning light. "Dad, it's okay now. I protected you." Joshua's small hand gently gripped his father's large one. In the police station interrogation room, Carol sat with her hands folded on the table and began speaking quietly. "My relationship with Thomas began 3 months ago." In a matter-of-fact voice, she recounted the past. The investment bank office on the top floor of a skyscraper. Their relationship gradually grew closer during nights of overtime work. "I wanted everything he had." The investigator took notes methodically. Outside the window, dawn was approaching. "Then I became pregnant." The room's atmosphere froze at that confession. Carol drank some water with trembling hands and continued. "When I told him, he immediately ended things. Said he would never destroy his family." The circumstances of the accident day also became clear. On the highway from Manhattan to the suburbs, Carol had been driving. A heated argument with Thomas in the passenger seat led to her losing control of the car. "I panicked, and just ran away." But that was only the beginning. If Thomas regained consciousness in the hospital, everything would come to light. Carol's position, reputation, everything would be lost. So, I needed to silence him. Drugging the 4, tampering with the oxygen mask. The details of multiple attempted murders were meticulously revealed. But that child. Carol's expression twisted. Joshua's presence had disrupted what should have been a perfect plan. In another room, Joshua began giving his testimony beside his mother. A police officer specializing in child psychology asked gentle questions. "I first saw it the day after the accident," Joshua recalled in a small voice. "I went to see Dad after class finished. And then, through the crack in the hospital room door, he witnessed an unfamiliar woman. A hand trying to inject something into his father's fore. When he almost cried out in surprise, his eyes met Carol's. "Keep quiet. If your father wakes up, I'll be arrested. And if that happens, your mother might have an accident too." That threat froze his young heart with fear. But he had to protect his father. From the moment he made that decision, Joshua's secret vigil began. "I went to Dad's room every night. I knew when she was likely to come." Days spent hiding in corners of the hospital room, waiting unnoticed by nurses. Fighting sleep many times to continue protecting his father. Security camera footage backed up his testimony. A small shadow walking the nighttime corridors. Repeatedly reporting to the nurses' station. There was the figure of a 6-year-old boy desperately trying to prevent Carol's repeated murder attempts. "You did very well." When the investigator spoke gently, Joshua clung to his mother. No one would threaten him anymore. At the hospital, Thomas's condition was changing. As his consciousness gradually returned, memories of the accident became clearer. With Carol. As Thomas struggled with the words, Linda quietly nodded. Everything had been revealed by the police investigation. You don't need to say anything now. However, something had been irreparably broken in her heart. 7 years of marriage. The trust they had built together. Everything crumbled in an instant. The following week, Carol's initial hearing was held. Charges of assault, attempted murder, and intimidation. The prosecution sought a severe sentence. In court, Carol gave her final statement. Gone were the luxury brand suit and perfect makeup. I was possessed by madness in the name of love. At those words, Linda closed her eyes in the gallery. Love. That was the word of the woman who had tried to take everything from her. According to the doctors, Thomas's recovery would take time. It would be more than 6 months before he could return to work after rehabilitation. However, that time would not be enough to restore the family bonds. We can't go back. Linda's decision was firm. Divorce proceedings began, with Linda receiving custody. Child support arrangements proceeded matter-of-factly. Thomas requested a transfer to the West Coast after his recovery. He chose a new life, as if running from everything. Linda and Joshua began a new life while continuing counseling. Their suburban new home was smaller than before but filled with warm light. Mom, I'm not scared anymore. Back at school, Joshua gradually regained his smile. His figure walking the hallway with his teacher no longer harbored that dark shadow. Carol received a 15-year prison sentence. In prison, she gradually became mentally unstable. No family visited her, and she suffered a miscarriage. Everything was lost along with her ambitions. 1 year after the incident, Linda visited her former neighborhood for a property viewing. It was fall again, the same crisp autumn weather as when the incident occurred. By chance, she passed the hospital. The place where a small shadow had desperately protected his father. Now it stood quietly as a place where new life awaited birth. Mom, do you remember that time? Joshua suddenly asked from the passenger seat. I wanted to protect you. That's why I couldn't tell anyone. Linda gripped the steering wheel tighter. You protected all of us. A flock of birds flew across the twilight sky. A new season was surely approaching. 3 years had passed since the incident. In their small house in the Westchester suburbs, Joshua, now taller, practiced baseball in the yard. Joshua, snack time. At Linda's call, her 9-year-old son came running. His suntanned cheeks glowed with health. On the table sat freshly baked apple pie, a new recipe learned at Sunday school. Though their house was smaller than before, it held all the warmth 2 people needed. Mom, I got an award at school today. His eyes sparkled as he announced winning a writing contest. The theme was, My Pride. Joshua had written about his new life with his mother. Through the kitchen window, the evening sky was visible. The incident from 3 years ago was steadily becoming part of the past. Occasionally, they would see news about Carol in prison. Her former glamour had faded as she spent her days silently in her cell. With no visitors, her ambitions had completely crumbled. At her final trial, Carol had calmly admitted her guilt. "I've lost everything. But it's my own doing. I accept this punishment." The 15-year sentence was confirmed, marking the end of her life as she knew it. The luxury apartment lifestyle and career woman ambitions were all in the past. The miscarriage had pushed her further into mental decline. She frequently visited the prison infirmary and spent sleepless nights. Meanwhile, Thomas had started a new life on the West Coast. After rehabilitation, he transferred to an investment firm in San Francisco. Occasionally, cards for his son would arrive along with child support payments. "This is from your father." When Linda said those words now, there was no more pain in her voice. Joshua, too, had learned to accept letters from his father naturally. Linda's real estate business remained strong. Drawing from her experience, she specialized in properties for single mothers. Many women in similar situations came to trust her. "I'm so glad I consulted Mrs. Morrison." Hearing such words warmed her heart. It felt good knowing her experience could help others. The church community had become a great support. She continued volunteering at Sunday school and made many friends. Martha, the pastor's wife, was especially attentive to her concerns. "God only gives us trials we can overcome." Those words had saved Linda many times. Joshua's emotional wounds had gradually healed too. Continuing school counseling, he slowly regained his cheerfulness. He joined the baseball team and made new friends. "Play catch with me." On holidays, he eagerly taught his mother how to throw. It was heartening to see him gently coaching clumsy Linda. He had become active in PTA activities too. Where he once worried about Dad not coming to parent meetings, he now proudly declared, "It's fine because Mom will be there." They had naturally developed relationships with their new neighbors. The housewives next door had become barbecue buddies on weekends. Children visited back and forth, filling the air with cheerful laughter. One day while tending the garden, an unfamiliar woman visited. "I'm Carol Baker's sister." Linda tensed for a moment. But there was no hostility in the woman's expression. "I've come to apologize on my sister's behalf." The envelope she offered contained Carol's handwritten apology. Through prison counseling, she had apparently reached her own form of repentance. "I'll accept this," Linda answered quietly. She felt no need to remain imprisoned by hatred anymore. In the evening twilight, walking with Joshua, Linda looked up at the sky. "Hey, Mom." "Yes. We're happy, aren't we?" Those words brought tears to Linda's eyes. True, their current life wasn't luxurious. But maybe this small happiness was what truly mattered all along. The next day, Linda removed her wedding ring that she had worn for years. She bought a new ring as a gift for her son. "This is a token of Mom's promise." "What promise?" "That we'll always be a happy family together." That night, under the moonlight, mother and son shared a long embrace. Time flows, seasons turn. Spring brings cherry blossoms, summer brings cicadas. Fall paints the leaves red, and winter brings snow. Still, the memory of that incident would never completely fade. But now it stood as testimony to their strength. In the warm spring sunshine, Linda headed to show a new property. In the passenger seat, Joshua spread out his homework. "Mom, I've decided on my dream for the future." "What dream?" "I want to be a lawyer. A lawyer who can protect people in trouble." Linda smiled gently at those words. The son who had tried to protect his father with his small body was now aiming to protect society's justice. Their new life was steadily moving forward. Perhaps it wasn't a flashy story. But for the two of them, these were irreplaceable, precious days. Linda gazed at her son's reflection in the rearview mirror. A strong, capable 9-year-old boy. They would continue walking forward together, step by step. Outside the window, spring winds lifted cherry blossom petals into the air, as if announcing the beginning of a new season. In the morning mist of Boston's suburbs lay an upscale residential area. Among the orderly rows of white houses, the Thompsons' 2-story home stood out particularly. Beyond the meticulously maintained lawn wafted the fragrance of Margaret's carefully tended heirloom roses. The spacious garden featured a fountain, said to have been inherited from the previous generation. In the living room, breakfast time was beginning as usual. On the dining table lay a traditional American breakfast, lovingly prepared by Margaret. Bacon and eggs, whole wheat toast, and the Thompson family's hereditary silverware. Everything was perfectly arranged. "It's only natural to uphold this house's traditions," Margaret said, watching Linda's chopstick use with cold eyes. "Western meals have Western etiquette. Especially in this house." "Yes, you're quite right," Linda quietly corrected her grip on her fork. After 5 years of marriage, she still found herself struggling with the customs of this house. The proper manners befitting an upscale neighborhood, the complex rules of neighborly relations, and above all, the strict hierarchy within this house. "My son deserved a more refined woman," Margaret sighed, taking a sip of tea from her antique china. "David graduated from Harvard, and yet—" Her words trailed off, but their implication was clear. Linda, a mere office worker at an accounting firm, was deemed unworthy of the Thompson family status. Her state university education was a constant source of dissatisfaction in Margaret's eyes. "Mother," Christine's voice took on a wheedling tone. "I understand this house better than anyone. I'm the true heir to this house." The 29-year-old sister-in-law worked in real estate while living at home. 3 months after her broken engagement, she still hadn't recovered. Though she dressed in expensive designer clothes and seemed to lead an elegant life at home, there was always anxiety lurking in her eyes. "How can you be married when I can't even?" Christine's words were always tinged with envy. The pressure of fertility treatments, funded by her brother, seemed to be wearing her down. That evening, a family meeting was called. After 5 years of fertility treatments, Linda was finally pregnant. The dinner meeting at an upscale restaurant was meant to be a celebration, at least on the surface. "I'm pregnant," Linda announced, and David beamed with joy. As a successful IT company manager, he seemed to be savoring the joy of finally becoming a father. But Margaret's expression was clouded. "A home birth is safest," Margaret immediately insisted. "Thompson children have always been born in this house for generations. And we simply can't do something as unseemly as going to a hospital. We must consider what the neighbors would think." Christine, meanwhile, suddenly burst into tears. But I. Her 4 years of fertility treatments had yet to bear fruit. Rumors suggested that her engagement had ended due to this very anxiety. That night, rumors had already begun spreading through the neighborhood. The Asian daughter-in-law was pregnant, and a Thompson heir would be born. Margaret's friends were gossiping about it at their afternoon tea parties. Linda's purchased baby supplies kept disappearing. Baby clothes, diapers, bottle supplies. When questioned, everyone just shook their heads in denial. The second-floor nursery in progress had somehow become a storage room. "You should just do what Mother says," David, overwhelmed with overtime work, was distant to his wife's concerns. "Traditions are important. Besides, we have Mother and Christine's situations to consider." The weight of monthly mortgage assistance and his sister's fertility treatment costs seemed to be binding his heart. Linda nodded silently. She already knew how to survive in this house. Her parents' home was a 3-hour drive away. But now, that distance felt impossibly far. After the pregnancy was discovered, Linda's daily life began to slowly distort. It started with small things. The baby clothes Margaret had bought were all black. "Black is practical. Stains don't show," she said with a cunning smile. Fearing crying at night, the crib was placed in the basement storage, and all toys were rejected as bad for education. The ultrasound photos from the obstetrician disappeared from the desk drawer. "I haven't seen them," Christine's voice carried a hint of pleasure. Even when Linda brought new prints home, they would invariably vanish. Eventually, she began keeping important photos at her office desk. Items kept disappearing from the closet where birth preparation supplies were stored, week after week. Bottles, diapers, baby powder. "You really don't take care of things," Margaret said. Even when Linda bought new ones, they would vanish somewhere. A neighborhood housewife discovered and used high-end baby items thrown away at the local garbage collection site. One morning, Linda found the pink baby clothes she had carefully chosen slashed to pieces. I wonder if a cat got in," Margaret feigned concern. However, everyone knew there was no cat in this house. The cut edges of the fabric formed a distorted shape, as if to strangle a baby's neck. The harassment extended beyond the house. "Your daughter is making my son miserable," late-night calls began coming to Linda's parents' home. Her mother asked worriedly, "Are you really all right?" On the other end of the line, someone could be heard quietly laughing. It always coincided with Christine's return home time. Anonymous accounts posted defamatory comments on Linda's social media. "An unsuitable marriage, a stain on the family lineage, Asian poisoner." The writing style of the posts seemed familiar somehow. Margaret's usual tone, Christine's distinctive expressions. Going back through the accounts revealed obsessive posts dating from David and Linda's wedding day. Anonymous tip-offs were made to the accounting firm. False allegations that a pregnant employee was leaking confidential information. During the HR investigation, Linda found Christine's real estate company business card in her office desk drawer. "I never handed out such cards." Christine's words were clearly lies. Interference with medical professionals also began. Linda's obstetrician started receiving anonymous complaint calls. Appointments were canceled by someone, and test results stopped arriving. Right then, a sudden decision for home birth was made. "It's Thompson family tradition," Margaret declared imperiously. "We can't trust hospitals. I know an excellent midwife. She's overseen safe births in this house for generations." Sarah Wilson was indeed an experienced midwife. However, her eyes revealed excessive deference to Margaret. "Leave everything to me, no concerns." Her words carried an unnaturally transparent quality. Then came the decisive event. David's overseas business trip coincided with the due date. "It's a project I can't cancel," her husband said apologetically. "Mother and the midwife will be with you, so it should be fine, right? Besides, this is a chance for promotion." At those words, Margaret's eyes gleamed ominously. Christine wore a smile that suggested she was plotting something. Their expressions revealed the joy of an awaited opportunity arriving. As the due date approached, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier. The black baby clothes placed in Linda's room. The previous generation's memorial photographs on the walls. And at night, the sound of whispered conversations downstairs. New locks were installed on the entrance, and Linda's cell phone frequently lost reception. One night, Linda accidentally overheard Margaret and Christine's conversation in the kitchen. "We can't let this child taint our family's blood." "Yes, Mother. We must do something about it. Taking the child away will be simple. Let's think of a way that won't be noticed by anyone." That night, Linda seriously considered running away for the first time. But where could she go? Her parents' home was far, and her friends lived far from this upscale neighborhood. Even if she wanted to call a taxi, her phone had no signal. The windows that should have been emergency exits had somehow been fitted with locks. The day before David left for his business trip, Linda made one final plea. "Please, cancel your trip. I feel like something terrible is going to happen." But her husband answered with his usual gentle smile. "Let's trust Mother. She's thinking of you. Besides, this work is important for our family's future." That night, moonlight reflected off the garden fountain through the bedroom window. Margaret's precious roses cast eerie shadows, like baring their fangs. And downstairs, someone was talking in hushed tones. Those voices sounded terrifyingly cheerful. Labor began at 6 in the morning, as the morning mist settled in. Linda awoke in the dimly lit master bedroom. A dull pain shot through her abdomen. The contractions were still far apart. Outside the window, a light rain had begun to fall, and Margaret's precious roses dripped with dewdrops. The inherited fountain's water made an ominous melody. "So it's begun." When Margaret entered the room, her voice carried an unnatural excitement. "I've called Sarah." She held what appeared to be some kind of herbal medicine package in her hand. The midwife Sarah Wilson arrived an hour later. Her expression carried a somewhat uncomfortable shadow. Everything's progressing normally. But it will still take some time. At these words, Margaret cast a meaningful glance at Sarah. As the intervals between contractions grew shorter, the atmosphere in the house changed. Someone was quietly talking downstairs. Occasionally, Christine's laughter could be heard. At the entrance, a suspicious man pretending to be a delivery person repeatedly rang the doorbell, seemingly trying to check on Linda's condition. "Pain is natural," Margaret said coldly. "We've all endured it. Though with your lowly bloodline, you might not be able to handle it." By noon, the contractions were 10 minutes apart. Sarah continued her examinations carefully, but there was a slight hesitation in her touch. "Everything's normal. But if anything happens..." The experienced midwife's eyes occasionally showed signs of fear. Her words were cut off by Margaret's sharp gaze. "Trust our way." Her voice held some terrible conviction. At 3 in the afternoon, Linda's screams echoed through the house. "Hospital. I want to go to the hospital." Sharp pains shot through her. But Margaret shook her head. "Are you planning to break this house's tradition? Or do you want to do something vulgar like your family would?" The water Christine brought as refreshment had a bitter taste. Linda instinctively refused it. "It's okay, I don't need to drink." A faint white powder had settled at the bottom of the glass. "How stubborn," Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You don't even understand this house's ways, yet you tricked my precious son into marriage." Her words dripped with years of hatred. By 6 in the evening, the contractions had reached their peak. Anxiety showed on Sarah's face. "Just a little more." "Push," her voice trembled. "I have children too." "So..." The rest of her words were drowned out by Margaret's cough. "Maybe it's impossible for you," Margaret whispered. "Someone who doesn't carry this house's blood." "Yes, you'll always be an outsider." An unusual tension hung in the master bedroom turned delivery room. The previous generation's photographs on the wall seemed to judge Linda with their eyes. The pile of black baby clothes cast ominous shadows. Christine was muttering something like an incantation under her breath. Is the baby okay?" Linda's voice trembled. A mother's intuition in labor warned of something terrible approaching. "Leave everything to us," Christine smiled eerily. "This child's fate is already decided." At 8 in the evening, the baby finally cried out. A thin but certain cry. Sarah efficiently completed the procedures and laid the baby in the crib. However, at that moment, her hands were shaking abnormally. "I must leave for now. I'll return later." Sarah left with an expression suggesting she had something to say. Her back showed signs of regret. She clearly hesitated while descending the stairs, as if knowing something irreversible was about to happen. Exhausted, Linda was drifting in and out of consciousness. The sound of rain echoed like a lullaby. However, even within that comfortable sound, some ominous melody mixed in. Then came the moment of fate. At 9 o'clock, the sound of a car engine could be heard downstairs. Had Sarah returned? But the next moment, Linda's blood ran cold. Hushed conversations at the entrance. An unfamiliar man's voice. And Christine's triumphant laughter. Margaret quietly opened the room's door. In her hand was what appeared to be some kind of paper. Adoption papers, perhaps. Christine stood behind her, holding some large cloth bag. The fabric had ominous red stains. This child is a burden. A stain on our bloodline. Margaret's voice was unnervingly calm. We should just get rid of such a child. As punishment for ruining my son's life. Christine slowly approached the crib. What a cute baby, her voice carried in strange attachment. I'll take care of it. I'll take it outside. This child should have been mine in the first place. Linda tried to scream, but no voice came out. Her body wouldn't move. Perhaps the effect of something mixed in the water. Only her consciousness captured the terror-filled reality. Christine lifted the baby and tried to put it in the cloth bag. At that moment, the baby let out a loud cry. As if sensing its own fate. Hurry, Margaret's voice rose with impatience. Before someone notices. The car is ready. The two ran down the stairs. The sound of the entrance door opening. Car doors closing. The engine sound fading into the darkness. Behind it, another car started up as if following. Linda grabbed her cell phone with trembling hands. But the screen showed no service. The sound of electronic interference, suggesting the presence of a signal jammer, could be heard from somewhere. In the garden visible from the window, the roses were beaten by rain, casting black shadows. And the fountain's water sounded like a baby's cry. That sound gradually faded away, replaced by someone's eerie laughter. When Sarah Wilson returned, the bedroom was already empty. Scattered bedding, an empty crib, and black baby clothes fallen on the floor. Her scream echoed through the silent house. I'm calling the police. Sarah pulled out her cell phone with shaking hands. I'm also responsible. I should have noticed. 10 minutes later, police sirens broke the silence of the residential area. Residents of the upscale neighborhood peered curiously through gaps in their curtains. Rumors had already begun to spread. Mrs. Thompson, please calm down and tell us what happened, the police officer's voice was steady. But Linda couldn't form proper words. The baby. While investigators searched the house, Sarah testified to everything. Margaret's unnatural behavior, Christine's abnormal obsession, and suspicions about drugs mixed in the water. I should have stopped it. At 10 o'clock, Linda's screams echoed again. A disturbing journal had been found in Christine's room. My baby. My baby only. I can't accept my brother's child. This child is mine. I'm starting a new life. No one will interfere. On the edge of the journal, written in deranged letters, were photos with an unknown man. A scene that looked like a transaction in a dark alley. And the back view of a woman holding a baby. We're checking the security camera footage, the police officer announced. 2 cars headed north. One black sedan. The other. At that moment, Linda's cell phone rang. The screen showed her husband's name. David. Linda. What happened? Her husband's voice was distraught. I got a call from your parents. Mother. Linda explained everything. With a trembling voice, she conveyed these horrific events. On the other end of the phone, David's heavy breathing could be heard. I'm coming back right now. His voice was more emotional than she'd ever heard. Go to Mother's place. I will never forgive this. David returned. His face was distorted with anger. Why didn't I notice? He punched the wall. Why didn't I? Police investigation revealed new facts. Christine had opened multiple bank accounts over the past month. And suspicious money transfers with the unknown man. Suspicions of human trafficking disguised as adoption emerged. We're tracking your mother's cell phone location, the police officer reported. The signal is on the suburban highway. Moving at considerable speed. The old house, David shouted. If Mother's going to hole up somewhere, it must be there. At midnight, the group departed for the old house. Police cars escorted David's car from front and back. They sped down the midnight highway without sirens. Why? Linda whispered from the passenger seat. Why did this happen? It was all my fault. David's voice was dark and heavy. I allowed financial control. I turned a blind eye to Mother's abnormal obsession and Christine's jealousy. The rain gradually intensified. The sound of rain hitting the windshield seemed like a baby's cry. As the wipers desperately cleared the rain, David desperately kept his foot on the accelerator. At 2 a.m, the group arrived at their destination. The Thompson family's old mansion. A dim light shone from the windows. And in the parking lot were 2 familiar cars. They're inside, the police officer confirmed through binoculars. 3 figures in the first-floor living room. At that moment, a baby's cry could be heard from inside the mansion. Linda's body trembled. That was definitely the voice. We're moving in. As police officers prepared their positions, David stepped forward. Let me talk to them first. They're my mother and sister. The front door opened. There stood Margaret, tears streaming down her face. David. Her voice trembled. I was wrong. In the living room, Christine sat against the wall, still holding the baby. Brother. Her eyes had an abnormal gleam. This child should be mine. Christine, David spoke quietly but firmly. Give the baby back. But I. Christine's arms slowly lost their strength. I wanted a baby too. I thought it was for the house. Margaret sobbed. For preserving the bloodline, but we did something unforgivable. As police officers carefully restrained the 2 women, Linda held her child. The small warmth. A steady heartbeat. That warmth confirmed that everything was all right. Mother, Christine, David's voice carried quiet anger. We're no longer family. This is the end. A week after the incident, David visited the old house with his lawyer. Margaret and Christine were still not out on bail. "All support will be terminated," he announced calmly. The stack of documents detailed the cessation of mortgage payments, fertility treatment funding, and renunciation of inheritance rights. "These are the last papers for our family." A "for sale" sign already stood in front of the White House in the upscale neighborhood. The roses were beginning to wither, and the fountain remained still. The neighborhood buzzed with rumors about the attempted kidnapping. "To think the Thompson bloodline would end like this," the elderly neighborhood ladies whispered. But those two went too far. Christine's real estate company immediately terminated her contract. Her fertility treatment savings would likely be seized as settlement money. The amount would significantly constrain her future. "I needed a baby," her words during interrogation made the police officers shudder. "Even if I had to take someone else's child." The rest wasn't recorded. Margaret fainted upon hearing her son's decision. "This house has our history." But her words reached no one's heart. She who had once prided herself on her upper-class lineage now lived alone in a modest suburban apartment, barely maintaining her lifestyle with part-time work. None of her former friends contacted her. David and Linda settled into a new 3-story house downtown. Bright sunlight streamed in, and the crib was fitted with lovely pastel-colored bedding. "No one will ever take our happiness away again," David vowed while holding the baby. Free from years of family pressure, his expression had regained its serenity. Relations with Linda's family were also healing. "You really did well," her mother's words brought Linda to tears. Her parents now visited on weekends. The baby grew steadily. Its smiles gradually healed the dark shadows of the past. The new family photos reflected genuine bonds, not bloodlines or traditions. Christine, after making bail, moved to another state. All her social media accounts were deleted, and she reportedly started a new life under a different identity. Rumors suggested she had given up on fertility treatments and was exploring adoption. Margaret's fall was more dramatic. Residents of the upscale neighborhood continued their cruel gossip whenever they spotted her working part-time at the supermarket. Well, karma comes around. Every Sunday, she attended church. People witnessed her spending long hours in the confessional, seeking forgiveness. However, divine forgiveness doesn't come easily. Letters from Margaret piled up in David's desk drawer. But he never opened a single one. The past should stay in the past. The old house was bought by a young couple. The rose garden was demolished and transformed into a modern landscape. The previous generation's memorial photographs and black baby clothes were all disposed of. A new family story begins here. A tale of true bonds, freed from the pressure of bloodlines and traditions. The family photo displayed in the living room, showing the baby's smile, suggested a bright future. Sometimes, David would mutter to himself, "I never noticed until the end. Mother and sister's madness. But this is our new beginning." A year after the incident, Linda became pregnant with their second child. This time, no one's pressure, no one's madness would threaten this happiness. The new life surely foretold a new morning. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Elizabeth Griffin went about her usual coffee-making routine. Her two-story home in the upscale neighborhood was wrapped in morning silence. The spacious white kitchen, with its neat rows of stainless steel appliances, featured a marble-topped island counter where a high-end French coffee maker stood proudly. Family photos adorned the walls, capturing smiles of her husband James, daughter Lily, and herself. In their Christmas photo, the three wore matching sweaters as they huddled by the fireplace, radiating pure joy. Next to it hung a picture from Lily's second birthday party, showing the little girl beaming in her pink dress before a massive birthday cake. As a real estate agent, Elizabeth handled high-end properties throughout Connecticut. Her unique approach, known as the Griffin style, had earned her the trust of wealthy clients, maintaining her position as the company's top performer for 5 consecutive years. While balancing work and motherhood wasn't easy, her meticulous nature and strong will helped her excel at both. Her husband James, a 36-year-old surgeon at St. Mary's General Hospital, had graduated top of his class from Harvard Medical School. Showing promise since his residency, he had already secured the position of Associate Chief of Surgery at just 36. Behind his gentle demeanor lay ambition. He'd received numerous awards for his contributions to community healthcare and was hailed by local media as a rising star in medicine. His influence at the hospital grew steadily alongside his reputation in the medical community. Then there was the newest family member, 2-year-old Lily. An angel-like child with golden curls and blue eyes, she had a distinctive heart-shaped birthmark behind her left ear. Elizabeth considered this birthmark, affectionately called Angel's Kiss, since birth, a gift from God. Lily's friendly nature endeared her to neighbors, especially the Robertsons across the street, who doted on her like their own granddaughter. Every Sunday, the family of 3 would spend time at the nearby park. James would push Lily on the swings while Elizabeth took photos. Afterward, they'd enjoy brunch at their favorite cafe. These simple moments defined Elizabeth's life. But 1 year ago, everything changed. When Lily was rushed to the hospital with a sudden high fever, James insisted on a private room, claiming it was for the best treatment. Days later came the shocking announcement: death due to sudden deterioration. When Elizabeth requested a final viewing, she was denied, citing risk of infection. The burial was rushed, and Elizabeth never got to see her daughter's face one last time. Since that day, Elizabeth's world lost its color. James began spending more time away from home, citing conferences and research, eventually suggesting a job transfer. Now they lived practically separate lives. Even during his weekend visits, their once warm conversations had turned purely practical. Every day, Elizabeth would weep in Lily's second-floor bedroom, touching her daughter's clothes and toys. The pink-themed room remained untouched. The bookshelf still held Lily's favorite stories, including Goodnight Moon, and her beloved teddy bear sat on the bed. Her sense of loss deepened daily, the pain of losing her daughter never easing. Yet in her heart, a nagging doubt began to grow. The peculiar circumstances of Lily's death. Her husband's sudden change in behavior. Above all, her maternal instinct warned that something wasn't right. One unusually hot Connecticut night, Elizabeth was reading in her bedroom. In her hands was Goodnight Moon, Lily's favorite book, which she'd read every night since losing her daughter. James was still away at his temporary posting, having tersely informed her he had to work over the weekend. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. At this hour, through the peephole, she saw two uniformed police officers. Middle-aged men with stern expressions and an air of tension. One was tall, the other shorter, but both carried themselves like veterans of 20-plus years. Pulling a cardigan over her silk nightgown, Elizabeth opened the door. The first thing she noticed was the sweat on their foreheads. Despite it being August, the tension in the air was palpable enough to make them perspire at this hour. Her heart began racing. The porch light cast grave shadows across their faces. "Sorry for the late hour, Mrs. Griffin." The taller officer spoke in a lowered voice. His badge read, Detective Michael Collins. "Yes, that's me. Is something wrong?" Elizabeth felt her voice trembling. Over the past year, she had imagined such late-night visits countless times, always hoping for new information about Lily. "We believe your daughter was found abandoned on the platform at Central Station. We'd like to ask you some questions about her." In that moment, something clicked in Elizabeth's mind. An inexplicable anxiety coursed through her body. An ice-cold intuition enveloped her. "My daughter died a year ago." Elizabeth found herself saying these words, driven by an impulse she couldn't understand. The words flowed naturally, as if guided by someone else. The officers' expressions changed instantly. They exchanged glances, and the younger officer began radioing someone. Static crackled in the quiet night air. "Would you mind coming to the scene with us?" Detective Collins spoke carefully, choosing his words. His voice carried a special tension she'd never heard before in her experiences. "What do you mean?" Elizabeth's voice trembled more. She unconsciously gripped Goodnight Moon tighter in her hands. "There's something we need you to verify." No further explanation came. However, the officer's demeanor suggested something significant. Elizabeth's mind went blank as she got into the patrol car. As they left the familiar upscale neighborhood, the car proceeded without sirens through streets with flickering streetlights. Though the same nighttime scenery passed by the window, everything felt surreal. Intermittent radio communications broke the silence. The officers spoke in hushed tones, but she couldn't make out their words. Her anxiety grew with each passing moment. Arriving at Central Station, they found several patrol cars and an ambulance already there. The usually bustling station plaza was nearly empty at this late hour. Police tape cordoned off an area, and uniformed officers and paramedics moved about as Elizabeth was led inside. Inside the station, an unusual tension hung in the air. The fluorescent lights seemed colder than usual. Her steps up the stairs toward the platform felt uncertain, as if walking in a dream. When they reached the platform, Elizabeth saw a small figure surrounded by paramedics. A little girl wrapped in a yellow blanket. Golden curls shimmering under the station lights. And the decisive feature, a heart-shaped birthmark behind the left ear. A face identical to Lily's. Lily. Elizabeth's voice quivered, filled with a year's worth of emotion. The little girl timidly raised her face. Those large blue eyes held a familiar light. "Mommy." At that faint response, Elizabeth's knees buckled. A police officer rushed to support her as she nearly collapsed. The child before her was undoubtedly her daughter. The expressions, gestures, voice, all exactly as she remembered. Yet this was her daughter who had supposedly died a year ago. A chill ran down Elizabeth's spine, unlike anything she'd felt even in midsummer. Why was Lily here? Who had abandoned her here? And most importantly, what had happened during this past year? Lily had grown slightly. Her hair was longer. She wore unfamiliar clothes. Everything indicated she had been living somewhere during this past year. Countless questions began swirling in Elizabeth's mind. And this was just the entrance to a terrifying truth. The night wind swept across the platform, silently watching over the mother and daughter's reunion. Despite the late hour, the police interrogation room buzzed with unusual tension. Under Detective Collins' direction, emergency DNA testing procedures were initiated. Elizabeth held her daughter tightly. "Mrs. Griffin, let me confirm something," a young female detective gently spoke. The date of Lily's reported death was August 20th, 2024. Elizabeth nodded. That date was forever etched in her heart. Death confirmed at St. Mary's General Hospital. The surgeon was. The detective looked down at her documents. Dr. Robert Campbell. And the death certificate was finally approved by Dr. James Griffin, your husband. Elizabeth's body shook. The moment she heard her husband's name, her vague anxieties began taking concrete form. Burial the next day. The detective's brows furrowed. Burial within 24 hours is quite unusual. In the adjacent room, a child psychologist carefully interviewed Lily. With remarkable composure for a 3-year-old, Lily spoke about her year at the doctor's house. Simultaneously, at the hospital, another investigation team began reviewing records. "This is strange," a veteran detective frowned. "There are clear contradictions between the admission records and death certificate." At 3:15 p.m. on August 20th, the recorded time of death, nursing records showed Lily's temperature and pulse were normal. Furthermore, there were medication records from that night. This signature here. The detective peered at the aged record. Samantha Williams. Night shift nurse in the pediatric ward. Large screens at investigation headquarters displayed hospital security camera footage. A figure leaving through the pediatric ward's back entrance late on August 20th, clearly carrying a child-sized form. "This is." The video analyst zoomed in. Dr. Griffin and Nurse Williams. Further investigation revealed shocking facts. Samantha Williams, 28, had worked in the pediatric ward for 2 years. Soon after meeting James Griffin, they had begun a secret relationship. Since last fall, Dr. Griffin has been regularly traveling to New York, reported the analyst. And each time, Nurse Williams also took leave. Credit card records provided more evidence. Luxury hotel in Manhattan. Dinner for 2. Expensive purchases at women's boutiques. Regular withdrawals have been confirmed from Dr. Griffin's savings account, explained the financial investigator. The destination is a luxury residential area in Long Island. At that address, they found a new mansion. And in its basement, they discovered something astonishing. A child's room. Toys. Children's clothes. And Lily's medical records. It had all been planned. James had decided to leave his wife and start a new life with his lover. To do so, he had faked his child's death and raised her in secret. Elizabeth quietly wept as she heard all the facts. Why now? The answer was in Samantha's cell phone. I can't take it anymore. Raising that child is harder than I imagined. This isn't the new life you promised me. This was the final message sent 2 hours before the abandonment. At the hospital, more accomplices were identified. Doctors who forged the death certificate. Nurses who falsified records. And funeral home staff who staged the burial. All had participated in the crime in exchange for substantial payments from James. An arrest warrant has been issued for Dr. Griffin, announced Detective Collins. We're heading to the conference venue in Manhattan now. At that moment, Elizabeth's phone rang. The screen displayed James. Tension filled the interrogation room. Please answer, Detective Collins said quietly. The conversation will be recorded. Elizabeth took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. Elizabeth, I hear Lily has been found. James's voice was surprisingly calm, as if he had anticipated his long-held secret would be revealed. The air in the interrogation room froze. The blue-white light from the monitoring screens highlighted Elizabeth's tense expression. Why did you do this? Elizabeth's voice trembled. In the next room, Lily was drawing pictures with the child psychologist. After several seconds of silence, James began speaking in a low voice. You might not understand. But this was all for a better future. Those words made Elizabeth feel an anger she almost couldn't suppress. A better future. For whom? Her voice overflowed with emotions she had been holding back. For my career. I couldn't expect promotion at St. Mary's. I was stuck being a mid-level doctor forever. But St. Joseph's Hospital in Manhattan wanted me. As their new chief of pediatrics. $800,000 annual salary, unlimited research funds. This was the chance to change our lives. On the other end of the phone, James sighed deeply. Samantha understood my thinking. She was someone who supported my ambitions. Unlike you. You were always satisfied with an ordinary life. Elizabeth felt her vision turn red. For that, you faked your daughter's death. Was that all Lily meant to you? Don't get emotional, Elizabeth. This was all calculated. Lily was raised in the best environment. Private lessons 3 times a week, French tutor, plans for Swiss international school in the future. James's voice wavered slightly. Just. Samantha gave up sooner than expected. She lacked the resolve to be a mother. Lately, she'd been saying every day that she couldn't handle caring for Lily. Detective Collins silently nodded to Elizabeth, signaling her to keep the conversation going. Investigators were desperately working to pinpoint James's location. So for this past year, Lily was? Elizabeth asked, fighting back tears. At the house in Long Island. I renovated the basement, installed soundproofing. No need to worry about neighbors. The housekeeper Maria took care of her. James suddenly stopped. Wait. How do you know so much detail? At that moment, there was a commotion outside the room. FBI. Don't move. The same voice could be heard through James's phone. Then, sounds of something falling. Sounds of struggle. Then clearly, James Griffin, you're under arrest for kidnapping, medical record forgery, and insurance fraud. Elizabeth hung up. She sank deeply into her chair with an exhausted expression, and the emotions she had been suppressing suddenly burst forth. But it wasn't tears, it was intense anger. As the investigation progressed, the full extent of the case came to light. James had planned everything perfectly. First, he secured collaborators within the hospital. Led by Dr. Campbell, 5 doctors participated in the deception. James paid them using funds obtained through fraudulent medical insurance claims. Nurses also collaborated in exchange for promotions and money. The funeral home staff was instructed to bury an empty coffin, paid triple the usual fee. The insurance payout was set to James as the beneficiary, completely unknown to Elizabeth. The Long Island house was purchased with this insurance money. However, the seemingly perfect plan had an unexpected miscalculation: Samantha. Initially, she had dreamed of a new life with James. But the reality of raising someone else's child proved more challenging than imagined. As her stress with Lily grew, she finally reached her limit. That day, Samantha took Lily to Central Station. Security cameras captured her releasing Lily's hand on the platform and walking away without looking back. Lily was left alone, standing still for 30 minutes until station staff found her. That child kept waiting for her mama, the station attendant testified to police. She seemed to believe someone would come for her. Sometimes she'd look up at passing people, then look down again. But the whole time, she held on to her picture book preciously. The investigation revealed more shocking facts. James had repeatedly committed similar medical insurance fraud. Creating fictitious patients and billing for expensive treatments, the total exceeded $5 million. Evidence of drug theft from the hospital was also discovered, with traces of narcotic painkillers being sold on the black market. These facts prompted the FBI to join the investigation. The arrest in Manhattan made national news. Prominent doctor arrested for kidnapping and insurance fraud, fake child's death to plan new life. Shocking case rocks medical community. As headlines danced across screens, Elizabeth held Lily tightly. Mother and daughter sat quietly together in a police station room. "It's okay now. I'll never let anyone take you away." Lily nodded slightly against her mother's chest. And then, words Elizabeth hadn't heard in a year warmly filled her heart. "Good night, Moon, read it with me, Mommy." The judge's voice echoed through the marble courthouse hallway. The prosecution had sought maximum sentences, considering the case's severity and social impact. Defendant James Griffin is hereby sentenced to 20 years imprisonment and revocation of medical license for kidnapping, insurance fraud, medical record forgery, and drug law violations. Elizabeth quietly listened from the courtroom gallery. Beside her sat Laura Jenkins, the lawyer who had supported her throughout these 3 months. Defendant Samantha Williams is sentenced to 12 years imprisonment and revocation of nursing license for kidnapping and child abuse. Sentences for accomplices followed. Dr. Campbell and other complicit doctors received 10 years each, nurses 5 years, and funeral home staff 3 years. Additionally, substantial compensation was ordered from the hospital. The trial process revealed issues shaking the entire medical community. Power structures in large hospitals, inadequate whistleblower systems, flaws in medical insurance systems. This case cast a spotlight on these issues. "Your testimony has saved many lives," Laura said. Indeed, the case triggered the discovery of similar fraud at multiple hospitals. Whistleblower hotlines were established, and third-party audit systems were strengthened. Elizabeth and Lily moved to a quiet residential area on the opposite side of town. Their new home, surrounded by white picket fences, featured a swing set and slide in the yard at Lily's request. The neighbors warmly welcomed the two. "You'll be starting kindergarten soon with the girl next door," Elizabeth said, gently stroking Lily's hair. Recovery would take time. But with weekly counseling and community support, they were moving forward step by step. Elizabeth's experience became a beacon of hope for others in similar situations at local support groups. She established Angels of Hope, a victim support organization, dedicating herself to preventing similar incidents and supporting victims. Meanwhile, James faced rigorous rehabilitation programs in prison. All his requests for visits were denied through his lawyer. His ambitions slowly faded within the cold cell walls. Samantha served her time in women's prison, confronting her crimes daily. Their relationship had completely crumbled immediately after arrest. "Hey, Mommy," Lily asked one day. "What is it? Can I change the wallpaper in my room?" Elizabeth found new hope in such casual conversations. Despite her trauma, Lily was definitely looking forward. Together, they chose new wallpaper with small stars scattered across a soft pink background. 2 years later, Elizabeth published Pursuing Truth: A Mother's Love Exposes Medicine's Dark Side. In it, she detailed the medical industry's reality, twisted by power and greed, and one mother's fight against it. The book quickly became a bestseller, with movie rights sold. But for Elizabeth, the most precious thing was the small promise she shared with Lily every night. Good night, Moon. Good night, Mommy. Those words would never be lost again. Moonlight streaming through the window gently illuminated the peaceful sleeping faces of mother and daughter. There was nothing left to fear.